All right, your 49ers alarm clock update is a big one today. The time has passed for in-person draft visits. The NFL's deadline was yesterday, the Wednesday before the week of the NFL draft. So we sit here on Thursday, April 17th, exactly a week away from the draft. All of the 49ers' top 30 visits are in the books, and we've got 29 of 30 documented. We can go through all of the visits. So this is a show that you're going to want to pay close attention to because, again, draft visits, especially when we talk about picks from after the first round, draft visits on that 30 list have been the most predictive indicator of whom the 49ers will actually pick. Thanks to Matt Barrows. He always helps complete the list with his piece at this time of the year. We already had most of them, over 20, heading up into Matt's piece. And I'll credit him as we go through this list for the ones that he brought to round out the 49ers pre-draft top 30 visits, starting with the cornerback position, Quincy Riley out of Louisville. Quincy Riley's spider chart score is not going to scare anybody. So you can see here, he's a little bit above average in the 40-yard dash. He ran a 4.48. The 10-yard split, worse than that on the percentile score, but still solid, 154. Size is not great, 5'10 and a half. Weight is not great, 194 pounds. He's not a particularly big cornerback. Doesn't have particularly long arms, 32nd and 36th percentile with arm length and wingspan. But Quincy Riley, like every single cornerback whom the 49ers appear to be interested in, is an absolute dog. He brings that alpha mentality. 29 pass breakups at Louisville, always around the football. And this was a player who was not penalized over the course of a long time playing for the Louisville Cardinals. So he brings that feistiness, but he also knows how to pair it with enough restraint to be a good professional prospect at that cornerback position. I have Quincy Riley on my sheet as a potential third or fourth round pick. The 49ers brought in a couple other cornerbacks, Bilal Cohn out of Western Michigan and Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. We can look at both of the spider charts for those two players right now. Bilal Cohn out of Western Michigan is definitely taller than Quincy Riley. So he's going to bring more from the body composition standpoint and a little bit faster, 4.43 40. Western Michigan, by the way, that is a school that's produced 49ers in the past. Most recently, Jalen Moore, who just got $15 million annually from the Kansas City Chiefs to be Patrick Mahomes starting left tackle. But as you can see here, the height over 6'1" for Bilal Cohn. That's an 83rd percentile height for a cornerback. The weight at 190, so he's a little bit slighter of frame. That's also an issue with Kobe Bryant, who all these guys have that dog mentality. The 49ers love that. I think Richard Sherman helped instill that back when he signed in 2018. Deommodore Lenoir, Renardo Green definitely qualify. I think Trey Brown, the new free agent pickup for the 49ers from the Seahawks, being as good of a press cover corner as he is, qualifies there too. But that feistiness, you're going to find it in all these corners, including the third one on the cornerback visit list, Kobe Bryant. I'll pop up his spider chart here. But between Bryant and Bilal Cohn, you have players who are a little bit taller, but I think are going to have to pack on some muscle. Kobe Bryant just doesn't have enough of the measurables here to make this spider chart really worth it. He's got a good wingspan, as you can see here, 70th percentile. The 40 is about average at 4.53, but he's a little bit slight of frame at 180 pounds, yet 6 feet tall. So as you can see, the weight is only in the 5th percentile. That's the most lacking here. So he's made up for that with his alpha dog mentality, but I think he's probably going to have to add a little bit of muscle to succeed at the NFL level. For the record, I have Kobe Bryant as a 6th round projection, Bilal Cohn in the 4th or the 5th round, and Quincy Riley as a 3rd or a 4th round projection. Those are the three corners whom the 49ers have added. Now, what's worth noting as we talk about the cornerback position is I think the 49ers have fortified themselves through free agency so that they don't have to draft somebody super high at the cornerback position. You could see the teal indicates free agent signings for the 49ers. This is the cornerback room, which I'm highlighting right here. As you can tell, Trey Tomlinson, Saran Neal, Trey Brown, all additions to the 49ers over the past couple months. Trey Brown, I think, could be a starter for the 49ers. He was back when he was healthy with the Seattle Seahawks. I think he's the third cornerback right now. Saran Neal, that is a special teams ace. And then Trey Tomlinson, intriguing player. They claimed him off waivers from the Rams, but he's only 5'8". Again, the theme holds true. He's got that dog in him. Very, very feisty player. But the 49ers could go to battle with this group right now, I think, and be okay. I think it's more important to fill in the red, which you see up here in the front seven. I think the draft is going to have to be about attacking the defensive line and linebacker. But I think that the reason there's so much teal down in the secondary, including at backup safety for the 49ers, is because they wanted to be in position where they weren't desperate to have to get a cornerback or a safety in this NFL draft. If there's a player who they really like, of course, there's room to pick him and improve the roster, but they're not in that position of desperation at cornerback, which is why we look at the three visits. Quincy Riley, Bilal Cohn, Kobe Bryant, all being mid-round or later projections for the 49ers. I think it's pretty easy to put 2 and 2 together in that regard. All right, now we're going to move on to the defensive line, because I just said the defensive line is so important for the 49ers. Obviously, red marks a big need for San Francisco to fill on this depth chart. So you see a lot of red in that D-line room. You see some red in the linebacker room. So we're just going to move on to those 30 visits at the defensive line for the 49ers. First, Omar Norman Lott, defensive lineman out of Tennessee. Versatile defensive lineman out of Tennessee. I think he can give you some defensive end reps. I think he can give you some tackle reps. And this is a guy that has got really, they call him bear paws, really big hands. And I think in the limited explosiveness metrics that we have from Omar Norman Lott, we can see a player with a lot of athletic potential right off of the snap. Here is the spider chart for Omar Norman Lott. This is broad jump, 85th percentile on the broad jump, 112 inches. That is very, very strong for a player of about 290 pounds. The vertical jump, also really solid, over 31 inches. And then as you can tell, the hand size here, 10 3/4 inches. My hands are not nearly as big as Omar Norman Lott's. I mean, decently big hands, but 10 3/4 inches. I mean, that's big for knocking the football down. That's big for the hand-to-hand combat that happens between defensive linemen and offensive linemen. I've got Omar Norman Lott as a 3rd or 4th round pick, so this represents some potential value for the 49ers. They hosted him. If they go this way, they can definitely have an adaptable defensive lineman for the team. Go through the other defensive linemen. First, we'll start with defensive tackles. Walter Nolen, that's a player who a lot of people are saying, okay, this could be the 49ers pick at number 11. Walter Nolen, a very complete player, I think. I think that he plays the run really well and obviously has the pass rushing stats as well. Projected to be a 1st-round pick in this NFL draft. How high or how low in the 1st round? Well, that's going to be anybody's guess, but I think that it does seem like a fairly safe bet that he would be there at number 11. Can the 49ers trade back? Well, if a team is willing to trade with them, of course. My mock draft is coming out tomorrow, so you'll be able to see if I do pick Walter Nolen at that number 11 spot for the 49ers. But I can give a little bit of a teaser and tell you that I talk about the 1986 draft, where Bill Walsh ended up trading 6 times during the draft. And a lot of those trades were moves down, so he was sacrificing a more valuable pick to gain more picks later on, because he saw that 86 draft, which, by the way, is considered one of the best draft classes in NFL history. It was wildly influential because it was back before teams traded as much as Walsh did that year. But he saw that draft class as not very top heavy, but he saw a lot of meat in the middle. So he wanted more picks in the middle of the draft. And, you know, the 49ers, I think, like a lot of teams, wouldn't mind trading back in this year's draft and then grabbing a guy like Walter Nolen or Derek Harmon, another defensive tackle whom I think the 49ers are interested in, but is not, by the way, Derek Harmon is not on this visit list. And we'll talk a little bit more about Derek Harmon at a later point. But, when you look at players like Nolen, like Harmon, like Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle out of Oregon, Derek Harmon's teammate. Those are all guys who could theoretically be available later in the first round. But the 49ers pick at number 11 and then they pick at number 43. So there's a gap. And so logic tells you, well, if the 49ers, don't see any premier players at number 11, but they see a lot of good players from number 20 onward, can they slide down 9 spots or something like that and pick up some more picks in rounds 2, 3, 4, or 5? That's what Bill Walsh did in 1986. The 49ers ended up with 3 third-round picks and 3 fourth-round picks. One of the fourth-round picks turned into Charles Haley. That's a Pro Football Hall of Fame edge rusher in Charles Haley. So obviously what Bill Walsh did in 1986 worked, but unfortunately a lot of the league now thinks in the same way. They don't think that Bill Walsh was crazy anymore, and it takes 2 to tango for any trade. So I think that in all likelihood, if that dynamic prevails, next Thursday, the 49ers will have to pick where they're at, number 11. Or maybe they're interested in trading up. Who knows? But I think at number 11, Walter Nolen out of Ole Miss, the defensive tackle, might definitely be a possibility. Then there's Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. And Darius Alexander, the defensive tackle out of Toledo. Another addition to the top 30 list, this courtesy of Matt Barrows as he polished off that list today, is Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech. That's mid-round defensive tackle, 3rd or the 4th round. But I want to take a look at Darius Alexander's profile. He is a defensive tackle out of Toledo. I think that there is still a lot of meat left on the bone in the development of Darius Alexander. It was really good over the course of the past 2 years, but take a look at this athletic profile. First off, we've got a complete battery of testing for Darius Alexander. He's about 6'4", 305 pounds, so good size for a defensive tackle. What I notice on tape from Darius Alexander is that he plays the run really well. He is rangy against the run. And the 49ers need rangy defensive tackles against the run because you're playing the wide 9, which means the defensive linemen are further apart from each other, leaves wider gaps. But if you're not athletic as a defensive tackle, if you can't move side to side, then you're going to be in trouble. You're going to give up way, way too many running lanes. So you have to have good recognition, but then you have to have the appropriate athleticism to deal with both blockers and space. And you're dealing with both of those forces simultaneously. Well, if you look at the profile here for Darius Alexander, the 40 is very fast for somebody who's 305 pounds. Anytime you see something under 5 seconds, that's really good. 4.95 second 40-yard dash for Darius Alexander. You also see a good broad jump, 111 inches on the broad jump. Solid 3-cone drill, so the short area quickness is above average, but it's mainly the straight line explosion stats that are impressive here. The vertical jump is going to be correlated to that, 31.5 inches. Mentioned the broad jump, and then, of course, the 10-yard split at 172 for a 305-pounder is definitely worth noting. Alexander is still a player who is learning how to rush the passer. But I think if the 49ers go heavy on defensive tackles in this year's draft class, then there could be multiple of them, right? You could focus one of the picks on a good pass rusher, maybe Derek Harmon, and you could focus one of the picks on somebody who is really emerging as a run defense talent, because this team was number 29 against the run last season. They obviously need help against the run. Robert Saleh schematically should help the 49ers in that regard, but this NFL draft is going to be big for fortifying against the run. And I look at somebody like Darius Alexander and I say, this guy's got potential. He's got the ranginess that the 49ers might need in that regard. All right, so those are the defensive tackles. It's a very deep DT class. Remember, this was one of the staggering stats. There were well over 40 of these defensive tackles invited to the NFL Combine. The 49ers have 11 picks right now in the 2025 draft, which is the most of any NFL team, and it's particularly heavy at D tackle, which just happens to be the position with the most red on my depth chart. And red means that that's a hole that the 49ers need to fill. So would not shock me if the 49ers doubled up on defensive tackles in this 2025 NFL draft. Moving on to the edge rushers. Always seems to be a strong chance that an edge rusher is the 49ers top pick in the draft. That's already happened multiple times. There's James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, was one of San Francisco's 30 visits. Mikael Williams out of Georgia was another 30 visits. Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M, 30 visit. Elijah Roberts out of SMU, 30 visit. And David Walker out of Central Arkansas was a 49ers 30 visit. All right, where do we start? We've got some fun spider charts for this group because the first round projections of this group are just amazing athletes. We could start with Shamar Stewart. I mean, this is as good of a spider chart as you'll ever see. The 10-yard split, the 40-yard dash, the vertical jump, the broad jump. I mean, 98th percentile on the broad jump. 131 inches on the broad jump at 267 pounds for Shamar Stewart. I mean, everything that you dream of in terms of traits is here. The problem is that I could count the amount of sacks that Shamar Stewart was able to notch in college on one hand. So the traits are there. You could see him up on the screen. The guy is a complete athletic freak, but the production hasn't been there yet. Can the 49ers develop Shamar Stewart? That's obviously the operative question in this regard. They did host him, and then you could start talking about the value that you could glean from a player like that at number 11. Well, I caution about these developmental projects. I always try to put the timeline into context because the 49ers are looking for cost-controlled efficiency when it comes to their draft picks. You're only going to get 4 years of that from Shamar Stewart by virtue of drafting him. That's how long the rookie contract is. So if you believe that you can harness this awesome athleticism and turn him into a productive edge player against both the run and the pass with his pass rushing capabilities, if you think you can harness that relatively quickly, a year or two into his contract, okay, great. You get some first round value there. But if this is going to be a 3 to 4 year project and his rookie contract is expiring by the time that he's figuring things out, if he even does figure things out, then you've got bigger problems on your hand if you're the 49ers. And when you look at the edge rushers who they did bring in for those 30 visits, it's really interesting because 3 of them have a chance to go in the first round between James Pierce Jr., Mikael Williams, and Shamar Stewart. And then 2 of them are mid-round guys, Elijah Roberts and David Walker. The mid-round guys don't test nearly as well as the top-end guys, but they've got big-time college production. If you look at Mikael Williams and Shamar Stewart, and Mikael Williams is out of Georgia, those 2 guys didn't have big-time college production. James Pierce Jr., now this is a guy who had both big-time college production and the athletic testing that should make you excited if you're a player or if you're a coach like Chris Kasarik. Here's a look at James Pierce Jr.'s score. And there was time, and I'm not going to spoil what I'm talking about in my mock draft yet. It's going to come out tomorrow on the San Francisco Standard. But there was a time when I was strongly considering James Pierce Jr. to be my mock draft pick at number 11 for the 49ers. I mean, he runs a 40 under 4.5, 4.47. The 10-yard split is elite as well, 1.56. The broad jump, 123 inches. That's really, really good. And he's got some height. He's 6'5". He could convert speed to power as an edge rusher. Now, he's only 245 pounds. I don't think that the run defense is great for James Pierce Jr. So, and that has to be factored into the equation for the 49ers, right? Because they're a team that's trying to resuscitate this run defense. And I think that there has been a trend within the 49ers way of thinking toward the bigger bodied edge rushers, not these sub 250 pound D Ford clones, but toward the 260, 270 pound guys who can set a firmer edge against the run. But I think that Pierce's production and his measurables, which you see up here on the screen, are undeniable. And because of that, there's a team that's going to pick him high up in the draft. Are the 49ers going to be that team? It's possible. He was one of their 30 visit lists, but it is worth mentioning that there are some weaknesses to his game, and we'll see how the 49ers balance things out. There is a world, and it might be a likely world, in which the 49ers go defensive tackle at number 11. So we just talked about some of those defensive tackles. Derek Harmon, who's not even on the visit list, but I'm sure the 49ers are interested in him, is a possibility at number 11 for San Francisco. But there is a world where that's the case, and then they go offensive tackle in the second round, or they trade up from the second round because they need to pick up somebody like Erante Ursary out of Minnesota, who's a first, second round borderline pick, or even Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon, who's a first, second round tweener kind of pick. There is a very strong chance that if the 49ers would want one of those offensive tackles, if they can't get the premier guys, Armand Membu or Will Campbell, that they would have to trade up from number 43, just because you're a little bit too low for that tackle range. But they could attack it: defensive tackle first round, offensive tackle second round. Mike sending me a cool graphic. James Pierce Jr.'s relative athletic score is actually very comparable to a Jets first round pick under Robert Saleh, their former head coach, and obviously now the 49ers defensive coordinator. Here's that graphic. There's James Pierce Jr.'s relative athletic score at the left, and here's Jermaine Johnson, first round pick of the Jets in 2022 out of Florida State. Good player, was hurt last year, but it turns out that it wasn't a bad pick by the New York Jets. Look how similar Jermaine Johnson and James Pierce score, except for the fact, I would say, that Jermaine is a little bit heavier, 9 to 10 pounds heavier than James Pierce, and he runs a little bit slower, but I think it could make Jermaine Johnson a better all-around prospect. But the relative athletic scores are virtually identical for both of these players. The broad jumps, both over 10 feet, just awesome. They're the 10-yard splits, very similar for both of these guys. But the weight, you got a bit of a stockier player in Jermaine Johnson than you do in James Pierce. All right, let's continue going through this 49ers 30 visit list. We've gone through cornerback, defensive tackle, edge rusher. Now we move on to linebacker, where the 49ers had 2 30 visits. There was the guy that I talked about yesterday, Kane Medrano, who is the fastest linebacker out of all the prospects this year. 4.47 40-yard dash and insane 10-yard split, 1.52. The guy can really fly. Another guy who's fast, though, is Chris Paul Jr. They call him Chris Poo. Paul Poo's his nickname. And look who he ran into on his visit to the 49ers facility. This is from the 30 visit. Chris Paul Jr. with Fred Warner. Could this be the tandem of the future for the 49ers? Normally, we don't see pictures of current 49ers players with prospects, but this one was too good to pass up. And Chris Paul Jr., Pooh Paul, as they call him, out of Ole Miss, who, he played for Patrick Willis's school, but before that, he played for Dre Greenlaw's school. He went to Arkansas, then he went to Ole Miss. He decided to post this on his Instagram story, so we definitely had to borrow it. Like Kane Medrano, the other linebacker whom the 49ers hosted on a 30 visit, Chris Paul Jr., is very fast. Not as fast as Medrano, but he's very fast. Plays with his hair on fire. Is slightly undersized. So we're looking at linebackers at about 220 pounds whom the 49ers hosted. But I think makes up for that lack of size with his effort, with the physicality and the speed that he does play with. The issues for both Paul and especially for Medrano are tackling issues. I think that Medrano missed a lot of tackles. He overrun some plays because he's so damn athletic. I mean, watching him play, the burst is awesome on tape, but he's going to have to rein some of that in. He's going to have to become more disciplined. He's going to have to become more anticipatory. But you know who could help both of these linebackers with that? The guy who's up on the screen in the red shirt. and that's Fred Warner. Fred Warner developed from glorified cornerback at BYU, right? He was this star slot position. That's what they called it over at BYU. He developed from that into the best linebacker of this generation. And putting a guy into the room with him, especially given the 49ers track record of developing linebackers, I think is a really, really good formula. Bill Walsh in 1986, we always have to show the Bill Walsh book when I talk about it, but I was looking at this Bill Walsh book right now. Then there's a great Peter King article about that 86 draft. Well, the 49ers would look at players and they would say, okay, Walsh was famous for this. He wouldn't look at the weaknesses as much as he would look at the potential ceiling, the strengths. And he would say, wow, this guy is great in coverage. I want him. He could be an all-pro in coverage. Let's draft this guy. That same player could have had major deficiencies on run defense. But Bill Walsh said, I've got the coaching staff to be able to iron out the run defense issues, and we can bring out, even if there are 3 or 4 plays, only 3 or 4 plays of really good pass coverage, but they're exceptional plays. Bill Walsh believed that his assistant coaching staff could bring that greatness out on a consistent level. He believed in player development. He had an amazing staff, right? You see the Bill Walsh coaching tree. Well, those guys became head coaches because they were really good assistant coaches under Bill Walsh. One guy who Walsh truly believed in to develop his players at a high level was his DB coach, Ray Rhodes. So when the 49ers picked cornerbacks who can cover, but maybe were a little sketchy against the run during college, it was Ray Rhodes who was going to teach them how to hit. I think the modern day 49ers, if you want to look at the 86 49ers or all those Bill Walsh teams that drafted really well, how can the 49ers emulate some of that in 2025? Well, they have an awesome defensive staff now that Robert Saleh is back. I think that's unquestioned, right? Robert Saleh and Chris Kasarik built the best front seven in football together through their development, right? About 5 years ago. 2019 was the big coming out party for the 49ers front seven. Kasarik was in charge of the D-line. Saleh was the coordinator, but I think the legacy of the 49ers linebackers, I mean, there was a time when they had Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and Azeez Al-Shire. They had all 3 of those players. Well, that reflected, and that development and that progression reflected really, really well on Robert Saleh and on Johnny Holland. And now they've got KJ Wright, who's obviously familiar with both Holland and Robert Saleh. So anyway, you could take a player like Chris Paul Jr. You could take a player like Kane Medrano, who both of those guys obviously have a lot to bring in terms of raw athleticism. Medrano's the fastest linebacker in this draft. Even if there are deficiencies, the 49ers have the track record of developing these linebackers, especially at this position. They're really good there. So I think that the confidence in their ability to do that, plus their affinity for some of these draft picks, made the 49ers confident enough to move on from Dre Greenlaw over the course of this offseason. And now they are going to try to replace number 57 with one of these rookies, maybe not one of the ones that visited, but you can see what the 49ers are thinking in that regard. All right, moving on from the linebacker position to the offensive guard position. 2 offensive guard. Let's say it just depends on how you consider a player, because these guys all played different, not all of them, but a lot of them played different positions in college. Why don't we just go through all of the offensive linemen? We'll start with the interior guys, and we will move to the exterior guys. First, though, this show is brought to you by Mando. Mando starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use the code Lombardi at shopmando.com. That is shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. All right, moving on to the 49ers offensive line. These are the visitors on the 30 list. Again, starting with the interior linemen. Marcus Bowe out of Purdue, basketball background. I don't think he looked great at the Senior Bowl, but I think there's still a lot of meat left on the bone here, potential-wise. We talk about a player who played tackle, but I think projects as a guard and is athletic on the inside to take on some of those ultra-athletic interior pass rushers. Then there's Miles Frazier out of LSU, also a third-round projection who visited the 49ers. And then there's Jonah Monheim out of USC, who played several different positions for USC, but most notably finished at center. He's a sixth-round projection. I think that when we look at Jonah Monheim and the fact that he visited the 49ers, they may be interested in adding another late-round center. Last year, they signed Drake Nugent out of Michigan to an undrafted free agent deal. So those three guys, guards through and through, I think, coming into the NFL. Caleb Rogers is also a player who intrigues me. This is a little bit of a higher projection than Monheim. He's a fourth or a fifth round pick. Played four positions at Texas Tech in college. Is extremely strong. Squat at 600 pounds. Power clean 406 pounds. That's a versatile player with some quickness to his game as well, on top of the anchor strength, who projects as an interior offensive lineman for the 49ers. Then there are the tackles, and this is a headliner position for people who are following this NFL draft. You're talking Josh Simmons, patellar injury with Ohio State, but would have been a slam dunk, very high pick had he not suffered that injury in 2024. So he's a premium tackle. He came in on a visit. Kelvin Banks Jr., there's a debate about whether or not Kelvin Banks is going to be a tackle or guard at the next level, but I think the 49ers like adaptability. He's out of Texas. He is a first-round projection, maybe a little bit lower in the first round as well. Josh Connerly Jr., probably a first-round pick out of Oregon. John Lynch, and I didn't mention Jeffrey Bossa, the linebacker out of Oregon. He wasn't the 30 visit, but John Lynch was talking to Jeffrey Bossa at Oregon's pro day. Oregon has a lot of good players. Lynch, after the pro day, went to dinner with the Ducks head coach, Dan Lanning. And I'm sure that they talked about Derek Harmon. I'm sure that they talked about Josh Connerly Jr. I'm sure they talked about Jeffrey Bossa, the safety turned linebacker. Would not surprise me to see the 49ers go after an Oregon Duck. Speaking of Oregon Ducks, Diamond Lenore. He played at Oregon. That's worked out well for the 49ers. But Josh Connerly Jr., athletic tackle, good prospect. He's on the 49ers visit list. Anthony, then you got a tackle who's a little bit lower in the draft projection order, Anthony Belton. That is a third or fourth round pick projected, and he's from NC State. The 49ers also hosted him. Maybe my most realistic prospect here for the 49ers, given where they're picking, is from Minnesota. And his name, and this is another 30 visit. This is Arante Ursary. He might go in the first, late in the first. He might go in the second. He started playing football his sophomore year of high school. He's massive. He's 6'6", 330 plus pounds. They're looking for the succession plan for both Trent Williams and Colton McKivitz. I really think that somebody like Arante Ursary, who probably still has developmental meat left on the bone, right? I mean, this is a guy who started playing football late, blossomed into top Big Ten offensive lineman. But with the hand punch and with some of the technicalities of offensive line play, I think he can still develop. I think that at the lower first round, early second round, obviously that might necessitate a slight trade up for the 49ers, but I think this could be a player that fits what the 49ers are looking for at that tackle position. Now we move to tight end. And you guys want to see more spider charts? I know that I didn't show any spider charts there for the offensive linemen. I think that Ursary's spider chart might be worth showing. I mean, I talk about players in the 49ers would physically like. This is Arante Ursary's spider chart. Look at that 40-yard dash. I mean, he's 331 pounds. He's over 6'6", and he's running the 40 at just about 5 seconds, which is exceptional for an offensive lineman. We'll never see a lineman again like Joe Staley, who was 4'7", 40. That was supernatural. But Arante Ursary, look who he compares to. Armand Membu, who is a certified athletic freak. Andrew Whitworth, who came out of LSU in 2006, was also very fast on the testing circuit. And look, Will Campbell, another one of the premier offensive tackles this year, who is a athletic testing match to Arante Ursary, who does a lot of stuff really well from an athleticism standpoint. I think the reason he's going to be available a little bit later than Membu or Will Campbell is because he is a little bit more raw than those two players. So there's a little bit more development that's going to happen for somebody like Arante Ursary. All right, now we can safely move on to the tight end position. The tight end position is a fun one here because the 49ers have to look toward the future, but they can also score here in the present, I think, at any round range. Harold Fannin Jr., more of a receiver. He could be a Deebo Samuel type of replacement out of Bowling Green. I mean, he was a force in college. He counted for 50% of Bowling Green's offense. That could be a second round or a third round pick. So Fannin, exciting player, big time offensive weapon. But the guy that I'm super intrigued by, this could be real late round tight end value for the 49ers, is Jalen Conyers. So just wait till we get this Jalen Conyers spider chart up on the screen. This is a player who played part of his college career at 270 pounds. Yes, you heard me right. 270 pounds for Jalen Conyers for part of his college career at Texas Tech. He's about 260 now after he went through some of the testing circuit, but that's still bigger than your prototypical tight end. And even at those 260 pounds, this is what Jalen Conyers' testing profile looked like. Another really damn good spider chart. So you've got 121-inch broad jump, and especially the short area explosion. Pay attention to those. The 3-cone drill for Jalen Conyers, 6.94 seconds. The vertical jump at 260 pounds to be able to go over 35 inches in the air. That's certifiably insane. And he's got a good 20-yard short shuttle as well, 4.27 seconds. Basically, what I see here out of Jalen Conyers is a player who can theoretically move well enough to get open in the NFL, but is also big enough to block, which is really the coveted holy grail, right? You want that combination. And if you could get him in the 6th round, and some people haven't projected that low, I don't see how the 49ers would be able to pass that up. They've got a lot of picks down late in the NFL draft. They've got the 6, but obviously they have 3 7th-round picks on top of that as well. So, boy, I mean, this could be a unique piece at a very affordable cost for the 49ers in this draft. The third tight end who they brought in was more of a blocker, and that is the product of Yale and then Georgia Tech, Jackson Hawes. We expect him to be a 5th or a 6th-round pick. Finally, 2 wide receivers. One of them's name is Kyle Williams. The other one's name is Jordan Watkins. I know that since one of them has the name of Kyle Williams, you're going to be scared away. But this is a guy who was able to post more than 70 catches in a college season, a good separator, played for Washington State. I think Kyle Shanahan will really like Kyle Williams. Meanwhile, John Lynch might really like his Stanford guy, Alec Eilmanor, right? So maybe it's going to come down to Alec Eilmanor versus Kyle Williams in the 2nd or the 3rd round for the 49ers if they're looking for another wideout. But in all seriousness, keep an eye on those 2 players. Alec didn't come on a 30 visit, but he was in the facility for the 49ers local pro day. So I think that he deserves to be on this list as well as a potential 2nd-day draft pick for the 49ers. Then to round out the list, the 30 list, it's Jordan Watkins, smaller receiver out of Ole Miss, but he runs a 4.3 40. And he had the most explosive catches out of any receiver, like deep ball explosive catches out of any receiver in college football last year. Jordan Watkins, I think, is a solid player, and he might last until the 5th or the 6th round. 49ers need to insulate that receiver depth. Everything's a position of need. You constantly have to be filtering in new talent into these NFL rosters. Well, I think that Watkins might fit that role if they're not picking a wide receiver earlier. So that is the top 30 list for the 49ers. It's an extensive one. It's closed now. The last day to host players was Wednesday. So we have all the intel we need to make educated projections about this 2025 NFL draft. If you have a favorite player, if you think the 49ers are going to pick somebody in a particular round, leave it in the comment section. I, meanwhile, have finished my mock draft, and it is going to drop tomorrow. Doing more than one mock draft, I think, is a fool's errand because all you're doing is guessing. And especially if you don't have as much information as possible, those guesses are bound to be very, very wrong. So I try to make as educated of a projection as I possibly can. That's going to be dropping on the San Francisco Standard tomorrow morning. And we're going to be going through that actual mock draft over the course of the next week because we are a week away from the 2025 NFL draft. So this has been a very important 49ers update because that 30 visit list is in the books. Now you can go and argue amongst yourselves as to whom the 49ers should draft. Hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel a lot. Hit the like button. You know what? Memberships are open now too. And we had the big interview with Al Guido the other day. Members were able to get a hold of that interview a few hours before it actually came out. So if you support the channel with a membership, a lot of perks like that are coming your way. Go check out that interview with 49ers President Al Guido. Sign up for a membership. Hit the like button. Do all of the above. Our draft coverage is just getting rolling into full form. Talk to everybody soon.